Defending Israel with David Harris on JBS is made possible in part by a generous gift in memory of Eric and Mira J. Spector, the Paul and Lynn Late Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation,
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris, and this is Defending Israel. France is among the most consequential countries in the world. One of 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, one of the leaders of the 27-member European Union, a member of NATO, a country with traditionally close ties with the United States, and often, though more complicated, with Israel, and home to both the largest Muslim population in Europe and the largest Jewish community in Europe. And I'm particularly pleased to welcome Yonathan Arfi, who is the president of the CRIF. The CRIF is the central body of French Jewry to the world, to the French government, to the French media. And meeting with Yonathan now at a time when France has just experienced 3 rounds of elections in the last 2 months, with a lot of media attention about what happens next. Yonathan, welcome to Defending Israel.
Thank you, David. I'm very glad to be here.
Yonathan, we're honored to have you. Help us make sense of these 3 rounds of elections, the first for the European Union Parliament, the next 2, the snap elections that your president, Emmanuel Macron, called. Lots of confusion, lots of concern, lots of uncertainty. What happens next?
Well, we went through 3 votes in less than 1 month, and this first vote for the European Parliament, the second and the third votes for the French National Assembly, and the idea was to make a clarification, to have a more clearer political arena in France, but it was not a success. At the end, we have now a more complicated National Assembly than ever, with no party able to have a majority, and we don't know yet what kind of government we're going to have in France in a few weeks. So for Jews, it's a very worrying period, because, as you know, we have a problem with the extreme left, with a party called La France Insoumise, and the leader was Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has a very strong anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rhetoric. And we have a problem with the extreme right, with Le Rassemblement National, and with its leader Marine Le Pen. And we try to manage among these 2 threats for Jews in a very, very tough period now.
So lots of questions from what you just said, Yonathan. First of all, how strong is the center of France today? And politically, can it hold the country together?
Well, the threat was that after the elections, one of the 2 extremes would be in a position to make a government, to form a government with a majority of the members of the National Assembly. Fortunately, it's not the case. The mobilization of all the Democratic and Republican politicians in France managed to get a majority for the moderate parties, for the parties from the left, like the Socialist Party, to the center, and also to the right, a party called Les Républicains. And the National Front, the Rassemblement National, and on the other side, La France Insoumise on the left, they have strong minorities. It means it's a huge threat to us, but it's not lost. We have the feeling that there is a way possible to have a government of moderate parties, which for Jews would be much better than any other option. So we are now in this period of time with uncertainty, and we have to live with this question mark regarding the next government in France.
President Macron remains the president. American viewers need to understand. Is his position weakened, strengthened, or the same as it was before the rounds of elections?
Well, his position is weakened after the elections for one reason. His party has no majority in the National Assembly. He hadn't a majority before, but it was the strongest group inside the National Assembly. Now it's not even the strongest group inside the National Assembly. It means Macron has to make a kind of coalition around his party with maybe people from the moderate left, from the Socialist Party, maybe people from the moderate right, from Les Républicains. But it's not a good position for French president. Usually, French presidents have the support of their own political party, which has a majority inside the National Assembly. So it's not very comfortable for him, for sure. He wanted to have a clarification in the political arena in France. It's not the case. It's even a little bit worse than what it used to be before. But it's not a total defeat either, because not the Rassemblement National nor La France Insoumise were able to have a majority. So it's a mixed feelings for anyone analyzing the situations now in France.
Jonathan, you mentioned two people by name besides President Macron. You mentioned Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the leader on the extreme left, and you mentioned Marine Le Pen, the leader on the extreme right. From outside, the difference between them appears to be that Marine Le Pen tried, whether she was sincere or not, you'll tell us, but appealed to Jews to vote for her party, suggesting that her party was not the party of her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was an anti-Semite and a Holocaust trivializer. She also spoke well about Israel. Jean-Luc Mélenchon was known to be anti-Semitic. He minimized the Holocaust. What worked here? Was Marine Le Pen successful in reaching out to Jews with her appeal? Did they believe her or not? And what happened with Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the Jewish community?
Well, that's a very important question. We have two extremes in the political arena in France, and they are not good for Jews for different reasons, not for the same reasons. Regarding the extreme left, it's quite easy. They are very aggressive towards Israel, very dangerous also for Jews. They have, for instance, called for the boycott of Israel at the Olympic Games. They target Jews for supporting Israel. So they are very clear political enemies for us. Regarding the extreme right, the situation it's much more complex, because the extreme right, of course, used to be clearly anti-Semitic, as you mentioned it, regarding its founding leader, Jean-Marie Le Pen. Now the situation has changed a lot. Marine Le Pen made a strategic change in the policy of the party, trying to attract Jewish voters. Not because they think that we could change the results of the elections. Jewish voters make up only less than 1% of the French population, so less than 1% of the French voters will not make any majority in this country. But she considers that Jews have a symbolical importance in the public debate, and that for moral reasons, having the support of Jews would be a strategic move for her and for Rassemblement National. That's why they decided to make a huge focus on Jewish issues, on the struggle against anti-Semitism, on supporting Israel. But at the end of the day, they are not able to denounce anti-Semitism coming from their own side. They are very strong at denouncing anti-Semitism coming from the Islamists, coming from the extreme left, but they are very weak at denouncing anti-Semitism coming from the far right. Also, we have to have in mind that they are a danger for the Jewish life, as are all the leaders and the parties of the extreme right all over Europe, because they are a threat for religious freedom in Europe, and they are allies. They are allied with countries, with parties in Europe, which are very, very hostile to Jews all over Europe. So it's not something which could be, I would say, comfortable for the Jewish continuity in France. And at the end, I want also to say that it's a populistic party. They use populism as a way to attract voters. It's a nationalistic party, and we consider that it's not possible for Jews to accept these kind of perspectives, because we know through history that populism has never protected Jews.
But Jonathan, the media gave quite a bit of attention to people like Serge Klarsfeld, who was well known as a longtime Nazi hunter in the years after the Second World War, who said very clearly, I'm going to support Marine Le Pen and the National Rally, as it's called in English. And I urge others to do the same. And there were some reports that French voters living in Israel also gave quite a bit of support to the National Rally Party. Do you actually have numbers, any exit polling, any sense of how Jews voted in these various rounds of the French elections?
Well, first regarding Serge Klarsfeld, who is a very important person and voice in the public debate in France, he did not say that he supported the National Rally and Marine Le Pen. He said that he would vote for a moderate party from President Macron party. That's his position. But at the second round of the election, if he had no choice between the extreme left and the extreme right, he would vote for the extreme right. That's what he said, which is very different, because he lives in a place in France, in Paris, where there was not this kind of choice to make. So it was a very strong statement from him, but a theoretical one, not a practical one. And that's what we fear most in France for Jews, is to have to choose between Marine Le Pen and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And for sure, in the case we had such a choice to make, many Jews would vote for Marine Le Pen. Some would vote also for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. But our work as a Jewish institution is to make sure that we will never have to make this choice. And the fact is that we don't have in France ethnic or religious statistics. We don't have. We are not able to give you figures about the votes of Jews. We have the results of the vote in Israel, where some French citizens live, and they are supposed to be mainly Jewish. And among them, the right make a strong score, but there was no candidate from National Rally for the parliamentary elections. So it's difficult to say, but for sure, nobody was having a vocal support inside the Jewish community for the National Rally, and now it's the case. Some people publicly say that they support the National Rally, but they are still a minority of the French Jewish community for sure.
Thank you for clarifying that, because the media here wasn't quite as clear in explaining things as you just were. But meanwhile, the media also reported one rabbi, a prominent rabbi in Paris, who said very publicly, and I'm not quoting him, but in effect, this is a time for French Jews to leave. And then there were various reports from the Jewish Agency and elsewhere that there were more inquiries by French Jews about the possibility of making Aliyah to Israel. If I recall correctly, the rabbi said either to Israel or to other countries that will better protect the Jews, or words to that effect. Is his view a minority view, or does it reflect a larger perspective among French Jews today?
Well, David, when we met first 20 years ago, I think you maybe asked each other, I think you probably asked me exactly the same question regarding the future of French Jewry. What is sure is that when we are Jewish now in France, we have to live with questions, with doubt. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we were living with without any question. We were not questioning our future in France. Now, for sure, many French Jews have doubts about the ability of their children to live in France, because they think that anti-Semitism will grow in the next few years, and that it's a real threat for the Jewish life. But at the end of the day, we know that there will be a strong Jewish community in France in the next years, because France is a democratic and prosperous country. And as long as France is prosperous and democratic, there will be a strong Jewish community. We don't know in history a Jewish community which has disappeared in a country which was democratic and prosperous. So, of course, there are many people living with projects of now leaving France, but it's still a minority of the French Jewry. Just to have the figures in mind, we are talking about several thousands of Jews leaving France every year, compared to a community which size is estimated to be like 500,000 Jews. So it will not. It's not an existential threat to the French Jewry, but it's a real question regarding its vitality, regarding its strength inside the French society.
And Jonathan, staying with figures for a moment, how many French Jews do you estimate are now living in Israel?
That's a good question. We estimate that something like 100,000 and 150,000, maybe 200,000 Jews live in Israel with a French citizenship. It means either people who immigrated from France, or people who are born to parents who immigrated from France, because you can inherit it of the French citizenship even if you are born abroad to French parents. So it's a lot. It's something which is comparable in terms of figures to the French Jews in France, maybe a third of it, half of it, but we have strong links. We just also to have that in mind. France is very close to Israel, geographically speaking, compared to the US, for instance. Going from Paris to Tel Aviv is just a 4-hour flight. It means we have sometimes the same link to Israel than New Yorker Jews have with Florida. We go there for weekends, we go there for weddings, we go there for retirement, and it's a very, very intense dialogue between French Jews living in Israel and French Jews living in France. But of course, the center of gravity of the French Jewish community is in France, as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, anecdotally, because we have no figures in the United States, but many of us, myself included, have noticed more French Jews living in the United States than previously, often in New York and often in Florida, which you mentioned. We've also heard that in Canada, and I just came back from a visit to Canada, there seems to be more French Jews who have settled in particularly Quebec. Do you have any impression about whether these are just small numbers or something larger?
Well, for sure, there are more and more French citizens living abroad than before, because the French culture has changed. Expatriation, emigration is not something bad that it used to be perceived 40 years ago in France. And among them, French Jews are even more numerous in terms of proportion. And you have strong French Jewish communities now in London, in Brussels, of course, in New York, in Miami, and also in Israel. But it's difficult to say if it's people who have left France definitely, or people who have left for also professional reasons. Some people live, for instance, in Florida 10 years and then come back to France, and because they want to raise their children in France. So it's less definitive than it used to be when you make these kind of choices. But for sure, we have a very dynamic French Jewish community with a lot of young people, young families. Compared to the American Jewry, I think the natality rate is maybe stronger in France, and we have many Jews who make this choice of living abroad. For some of them in the US.
And JBS viewers, I can also attest to what Yonathan has just said, because I go back and forth to France quite a bit. Much of my family is in France as well. And even with all of these outward trends, the strength, the resilience, the vitality, the pride of French Jewry is really something to behold. And I hope you'll have a chance to see it. As we speak, the Olympic Games are about to begin in Paris. And there's a lot of question, first of all, about the safety and security of the Israeli team. I think the French foreign minister himself has offered assurance. And also the question about protests. And I believe a gentleman named Thomas Porte from the far left has also offered his public views on whether Israel should even be participating or not. You can't predict, but from where you sit, what's likely to happen in the Olympic Games as it affects Israel and its athletes?
Well, I think the athletes will be protected from any demonstration or direct threat to them, because there will be a strong security system around them. And the French government is well aware that the whole reputation of the Olympic Games in Paris are at stage, so at risk. So they will make sure that nothing serious happen. But we know that the public debate, the social networks, all the things around the Olympics will be full of hatred of Israel, full of people comparing Israel to Russia and saying that Israel should not be authorized to compete. And we know that as many international events now, it will be an opportunity for anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activists to be very vocal. So we are prepared for that. We reacted strongly when we heard the statement by Thomas Porte from the extreme left, asking for Israel not to be banned from the Olympics. There was a strong condemnation of all the political arena against him, except from the extreme left, of course. And we will continue to be very, very vigilant against this kind of risk during the Olympics.
We hope they'll be safe, and we know the French Jewish community will also try to make them feel very welcome and appreciated. We only have a few minutes left. There's lots I'd still love to ask you, but I want to focus on one issue we haven't touched on yet. We spoke about the extreme left. We spoke about the extreme right. We haven't yet spoken about the Muslim presence in France, which, as I said at the beginning, is the largest in Europe, as is the Jewish community. How do you see this relationship unfolding? Obviously, it's complex. You can't give one simple answer. But is it an opportunity? Is it a threat? Or is it both?
Well, it's difficult to reduce people to assign people to their religious identity. So I'm very careful about the way to answer these kind of questions. But for sure, there is a specific anti-Semitism within the Muslim community. And with now the presence of a strong Muslim community in France, we have to face this kind of anti-Semitism in France. And when we talk about anti-Semitism, we have to take into account the fact that part of this anti-Semitism is fueled by Islamism, by radical Islam. And the fight against radical Islam is a necessity in the fight against anti-Semitism in France. And this is particularly true among the younger generations, because as a part of the Muslim population among the younger generations is even higher. And we have people with the influence of social networks who are more radicalized through speeches by Islamist and radical Islam leaders. So we have to continue the fight. But we have also strong allies among the Muslim population in France. We have Muslim activists who raise their voice against radical Islam, and we have to support them. We have to support them exactly the same way we've supported dissidents from the Soviet Union and from the communist system 40 years ago. That's the only way to win this battle. It's to help moderate Muslims win the battle against radical Muslims. And that's something which is now happening in front of us, and we have to be part of that battle with our allies, because we know that it's a direct threat to us as Jews, but a direct threat to us also for every citizen of a democratic country in the world.
One follow-up question, and I think it'll have to be our last question. You said very importantly that the younger Muslims may be radicalized more than their parents. In the principle of acculturation and integration, the younger people should be more integrated into France and French values than their parents, who may have been born elsewhere and educated elsewhere. What does this suggest about the possibilities of full integration in the Republican values? The Republican, in this case, not meaning a partisan party, but in the French Republican values. What does it mean?
Well, it means that the integration into the French Republican model has failed. It has failed for not everyone, but it has failed for many people. And it has failed because it's also not defending itself strongly against, for instance, the Islamist ideology. And people who want to say to young Muslims that they behave first to the Muslim Ummah, to the Muslim community, and not to the French, to their French citizenship and the whole their country, France. So it's a real battle, which is occurring in France, but which is also happening in every Western country now within Muslim communities, and we have to continue to fight. We can help as Jews because in a way we have shaped a kind of model of integration as a religious minority in Western countries. So we are able to show that being totally integrated citizens in our Western democracies does not mean rejecting our own identity. So it's not, you can combine both, and that's something which has to be shown strongly to new immigrants from anywhere, because we have 2,000 years of experience of being a diasporic people.
A minority community.
Yeah. And that's something maybe we could share with others.
That's a very important, I think, and hopeful note on which to end this conversation. Yonathan, thank you so much for joining us from Paris. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said at the beginning, France is an extraordinarily important country. Its Jewish community is the third largest in the world. And it's very blessed to have Yonathan Arfi as the president of CRIF, the umbrella body for French Jewry. Thank you. And looking forward to seeing you again next week, dear viewers. Bye-bye.